Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, sponsored by Progeny Coaching. This is the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we dive into the wins, the lessons, and some of those failures that make your legacies worth living. Today, I'm happy to welcome Jake Schuster, founder and CEO at Gemini Sports. Jake, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me, Jake, why is Gemini important to the future of sports?
Well, Moneyball took place almost 25 years ago now. And, we've just seen such an evolution past that initial space where we thought it would be a good idea to bring in some mathematicians to see if they can help us assess what might happen on the field or on the pitch or on the court. And nowadays, with the explosion of AI, things are moving even faster. And I think we're in this era where, I'll just say the obvious one here. Like, folks who are using ChatGPT don't want to deal with Tableau dashboards or sophisticated workflows. They want to be able to do things in one click or ask natural language questions. And there aren't products out there that are providing that yet. And we do.
Awesome. So you mentioned the field, the pitch, et cetera. Tell me about the sports that you're in right now.
Yeah, so we actually started in the NFL. The Indianapolis Colts were our first customer. And then we went into college basketball. Really, we're focusing our go-to-market on soccer now, on what the rest of the world calls football. So we're in the Premier League. We're in Italy, Serie A. We're in the A-League in Australia and moving into quite a few others over the next few months.
And so what's happening then, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is these teams recognize they have all this data, but they're not sure how to mine it. Is that it?
Yeah, I think it goes beyond the data that it's an unavoidable part of all of this. I think data and analytics are actually kind of boring, where of course we need to be doing those things. I think it's the base of the pyramid. But actually my fascination is not in those topics. It's in what some would call like systems engineering or systems architecture. So how are teams making decisions and why do people do what they do and how do they get things done? And scouting reports are maybe the most important data source, but people forget about that. There are subject matter experts that know how to look at sports with their own two eyes and judge things in a way that no computer can. And the distillation of that information and the management of those insights is critical. And I think it's done on a pretty poor level across sports now. So just allowing these teams to harness all of that subject matter expertise into a workflow that is efficient for the ultimate decision maker is what we pursue and is what we provide and is what I think is missing in most teams.
Gotcha. Now, if you watch the movie Moneyball, or if you talk to some of the guys that are in this space, a lot of times they'll tell you there's so much of what they do that's art and instinct and feel for what they're seeing on the field. How do you capture that and be able to have a query that pulls that kind of stuff up?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. And I think the key is just having a scratch space where folks can enter this stuff. And sometimes it's not even, the gut feel stuff. Sometimes it's just information like, hey, this player's wife does or doesn't want to live in London, where the team is based. And information that can influence a whole process when you're looking at a number of players that you might want to add to your team. And just having a place where that's organized, I think, is key. Notion might be a product that polarizes a little bit, but it's undeniably advanced beyond products that came before it when it comes to allowing for single sources of truth for information that organizations have. And I think we're doing something similar to that for sports.
Gotcha. So tell me just a little bit about your journey to Gemini. Why is this important to you?
I worked in professional sports for 9 years. It's a very volatile industry. It's one that has a lot of glamorous moments, but a lot more challenging moments when you're on the inside. And when I was doing my PhD work, I was over in New Zealand working with the All Blacks rugby sevens teams, the women's and the men's program ahead of the 2016 Olympic Games. And I had to learn 3 coding languages. So I had to learn SQL and Python and then build a custom MATLAB program to process radar gun data. And I said, this is horrible. Someone has to make this easier. And I really felt so strongly that, when practitioners, when executives are trying to manage information, they shouldn't be caught between the option of learning how to code or being helplessly dependent on an engineer for every question they have. Teams must have analytics departments. That's not something we're ever trying to compete with or replace. But those folks should be research departments, and they should be efficient and not also responsible for architecting data streams or for presenting an application layer to the stakeholder. Those things can be automated. I often say that sports teams want to be sports teams and not software companies. So anyways, I was a practitioner and I felt this pain point myself. And ultimately I was just a scientist who had an idea and found some people to build what I had in my head.
So you've got athlete, scientist. Where did business owner come into this, right? When did it click for you that I'm now a business owner? I'm an entrepreneur.
I'll let you know when it does. It's really funny when I catch up with old friends. I actually stayed over with an old colleague of mine, Dan Howells, who's been with England Rugby for a long time and now has his own business, Collaborate Sports. And we were strength and conditioning coaches on the rugby circuit back in the day. And we were talking about names and friends and things, and I realized I haven't thought about any of these topics in 5 years. And really, this whole world of cap tables and VCs and hiring and firing and profit margins, it's so wildly different from sports. But I think they do say that outsiders have a better chance of disruption than insiders for certain industries. And I'm not only not a data scientist, I'm not a software person by background at all. I found those people to contribute and to build what was in my head, like I said. So honestly, long answer longer, it's just been figuring things out one step at a time, one day at a time. I don't think, for all the amazing books that are out there, there's nothing that is a playbook for doing this. And I think, I often say I have no talent, but being brave enough to try this and just keep going.
So talk me through that first conversation when you had this idea and you brought it to somebody.
Yeah.
Did they tell you were nuts? What was that first conversation like?
Absolutely. And I grew up middle class. I bartended my way through grad school and worked in an industry that pays terribly. So I was not someone who could self-fund their business. The reason I was able to go full time is because 5 people that I knew at the gym here in Miami told me, if you go full time, we'll finance it. We'll write you some investment checks. And that allowed me to get through the next 6-8 months of pitching 43 venture capitalists who said no before one said yes, and that's just how that happened. So I think if someone says that you're nuts, that's probably a really great sign that you should do something, and it's just about going out and doing it.
Well, I think that all of those no's are an important consideration for our audience as well, because there's people out there that have the impression that getting funding for what they think is an ingenious business idea is like snapping your fingers. Oh, I'll take it and share it with somebody. They'll love my idea. I don't know how they can't. The numbers look great. I've run the numbers. It's going to be spectacular. Going to make them a ton of money. They're going to be beating down my door to give me money. Doesn't work that way.
Maybe in 2021 it was like that, but not anymore.
That's true. Yeah. So talk to me then. How many times did you want to give up? How many times did you get that no and say, no, I'm ready to give up? Or did you just say, no, I refuse to give up on this dream?
Look, you're going to roll your eyes at this answer, but it's never crossed my mind. Not once.
Okay.
There are of course those moments of doubt. And look, I had them yesterday when something didn't work out well with a customer, where you think, oh my God, what would I do with my life if I couldn't do this? And you have those moments, those moments of fear. But the thought of giving up, never, because I think something that's really important is that just because you're getting no from someone or someone is telling you that your business model is wrong or it'll never scale or whatever, doesn't mean you can't find 10 other people who would say the opposite. And that's the case with professional venture capital investors. They are the best at what they do. That doesn't mean that they're always right. And in fact, most of the time they're not. And that's why the business models are based on having 1 out of 10 businesses succeed, right, that they invest in. They're not always right. And at the same time, you as an entrepreneur will be wrong about most things. So it's just accepting those dual realities and then plowing forward.
Yeah, I think Chet Holmes was one in one of his books in the mid 2000s. He made the comment about the fact that 3% of people are buying your stuff at any one time, right? And that doesn't mean you aren't going to have to hear 97 no's before you get to a yes, right? And you may get 3 in a row, and then you'll have another 97 no's before you get to a yes. It just happens. And no, I didn't roll my eyes, mainly because that in itself is an example of passion. It shows that you are behind your purpose. You see something that you see this void, you want to fill the void, and you felt you were the person to fill that void. And there's no going back from it.
There's no going back.
That's great. I love it. So talk to me about the business right now. How big are you? I mean, how many people, how many employees? What has it been like adding those first employees and the lessons along the way there?
Yeah, so we are, I think, 11 people now. We got as big as 18 last year and cut it right back down. So we've had the journeys that most companies have, and it's wild how folks will tell you, they'll advise you, your first employees will not be your forever employees, and you'll have high turnover in the first 2 years, and all those things, and then it happens, and you come out the other side and say, well, that was rough. But we've had people who are here since the day we got funding, or within 6 months after that, and I just say that hiring is not something you can ever just be good at by studying up on it. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make big mistakes. And I don't know if I could provide any advice that folks wouldn't have already heard. Something that fascinates me about entrepreneurship is all of the advice is out there. In fact, it's pretty easy to access. Just most of the time you have to learn that lesson yourself. Like everybody knows fire fast, or, the pain of letting go of someone that's not working is much greater than, or is much less than the pain of dealing with them for longer. And then you think, yeah, I get that. And then it's the exception that is going to prove the rule where you go through that and you make that mistake. So I made all those mistakes and we came out the other side.
And I think that's the only way you can. The only way through is through.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I like it. All right, great. So what are you looking for in clients right now, in people that you're working for? How are you selecting the people that you're doing work for? Is it based on what they need or what you need as an organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when we look for, and bear in mind, we're pitching directly to sports teams. Typically, they're sporting director, general manager, chief scout archetype. And what we look for, we have, and this will completely change over the next 2 years as we grow and begin to scale. But what we've found has been a kind of accidental niche in terms of ideal customer profiles, what I would call like a historically significant team that's fallen on slightly hard times, and maybe one that has new ownership and wants to do things different. So these small and medium sized clubs who really want to innovate and want to think differently. And this doesn't mean they want to work with data, or this doesn't mean they want to work with AI. It just means they want to think differently. We definitely look for humility around build versus buy. It doesn't mean that it has to be a team who hasn't tried to build their own internal squad planning app. Oftentimes we're best fit with someone that's been working on that for a year or two and thrown $1 million at it and said, oh my God, this is horrible. Someone please come save me, with an off-the-shelf offering. But we look for folks who are open-minded. I mean, people have overused the term growth mindset, but I find that some of the biggest clubs in the world know that they don't have the answers and know that they're not software companies and that they need help from software companies. And some of the smallest clubs in the world think that they have all the answers and think that they're doing things in such a clever way and don't need any other innovation. So it comes in all shapes and sizes.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I work with my clients on quite a bit is finding who you enjoy working with, right? So often we go after that value proposition that we do well, something we know we do well, and we just expect there's going to be a market with it. And then 20 years later, we look back and we say, I really can't stand my customers, right? They're whiny, spoiled brats. I just don't like my customers, right? And instead, what we should be doing is saying, who do we want to work with for the duration of my time in this business? And what are their needs? Let's provide something that they need. And I think for you, it seems like it was kind of a combination of both of those when you kind of came to the reality that there was a gap here.
I think so, and I think you obviously, if you can, like beggars can't be choosers when you're a young startup. But I definitely noticed that we've been fortunate to put together a group of customers that they're ready to go through thick and thin with us, and they're in it for the long haul and all those other things that you want to work with good people. I'll also add. One of my favorite Twitter follows is Jen Abel, Abel. She tweets about founder-led sales, and her content's probably the reason that after banging my head into a wall with the sales guys for actually a couple of years, I said, F it, I'll do it. And I am the sales department at Gemini now, and have been for about 6 months. I couldn't be happier with that decision. But she says that finding a working go-to-market will take longer than making a working product. And that really stood out to me. And it's an awkward and scary thing to think about, but I've found it to be true.
Give me an example.
You think you know your ideal customer profile and you think you're sticking to it, but you're probably not. And you have to catch yourself in wayward directions a few times. And also, every time you think you have a pricing scale figured out, or the way that you'll handle bottom of the funnel closing deals, I think then another case comes in that turns it on its head, and that just keeps happening over and over. Or every time you think, oh, this market segment makes sense to focus on, then another market segment pops up and distracts you, and you think you'll be able to have the discipline and focus, but opportunities are opportunities, and you don't know what the right answers are. So I just recognize that finding the real hits there, it's not as straightforward as you might imagine.
Okay. So you think in the role you are in sales and being the founder in sales, do you give me an example of how you've changed your decision making based on the fact that you're closer to your customer?
I noticed that there is a bigger separation. I mentioned ideal customer profiles, so I'll be really specific here. So the sporting director is who I want to be our power user, because they have decision-making power. They have budgeting power. They're used to their price tags than the scouting department. And frankly, my vision is around the workflows of the sporting director. The reality is, not only is what they want more different than the from what the head scout wants than I would have initially thought. But I think we've realized that if we're not fulfilling the needs or solving the pain points of the head scout, then the sporting director doesn't care, and they're not going to look at this product, or they're not going to consider integrating it. That oftentimes people want the blessing of someone right below them for something, in case they don't end up using a product as much as anticipated. They want the person under them to love it, so that they're getting kind of the fruits of that labor, rather than the other way. Maybe that just applies to our product, but I've really noticed it as a pattern. So I think I've really changed my mind about how to approach that ideal customer profile. And look, a lot of times our meetings are with both of those people, and I have to say, well, we've got 2/3 of this works well for you, and 1/3 of this works well for you, and we're going to kind of flip that in our development timeline over the next year. But the point is, you should be excited to work with us and watch this grow, not trying to solve all of this person's problem or all of that person's problem. It's scary, because maybe we should, but then maybe we wouldn't get a certain price tag, or maybe we wouldn't be able to get buy-in from the other person. So that's been a bit of dive and dodge.
Gotcha. So if I think back to the Billy Bean era, right, and what was dramatized in the movie, there was this internal conflict between the scouts, the experts, if you will, versus what was coming through from what was at the time data and data analytics. Is there still that internal conflict, or do you see better adoption now than what they used to have?
I used to say that era is really past, that you don't really see people saying that they don't want to use data. But I think it's a little bit of a mirage, where I think people say, oh, we're data driven, we're data informed. And what that means is they hired a data person, and they're going to listen to them sometimes when it suits them. And I also think, I talked about how I find it all a bit boring, but I think you've seen this silo where it's like, what does the data say? What do the analytics say? And I just think that's totally the wrong way of looking at it. That it's the data is a data point. And it's like, what data? Looking at it what way? Asking what questions of it? It's not a singular, I can't stand the broadcast that are like, well, the analytics say this is their chance on fourth down. There's no one model that one person made says this in this scenario with or without this context. So I think, yeah, you've seen pretty ubiquitous acceptance of its place. But I don't think you've seen appropriate adoption or really mature implementation yet.
Yeah. So there's a book by the Heath brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, called Decisive.
Yep.
Have you read that? It goes through the manner in which.
What was the other book that they?
Oh, they've written several of them. They wrote Switch, they wrote Decisive, they wrote Upstream. I think Dan wrote Upstream by himself. But the beautiful part about Decisive is it talks about the failures, of course, in the way people make decisions. And the first one in there is confirmation bias. Right? Do you see that in the way people are using this data? Do they use that to justify the decision they've already made?
Yeah, 100%. And I think I actually really enjoy this when I bring like our kind of sample environments in for demos, because let's say we're doing a player search, a criteria-based search, just to show a part of the workflow. And I often say, look, if you're seeing players that you're already looking at, that's a good sign. If you're seeing players you're not looking at, it's one of two things. It's a good sign because you're finding players you weren't looking at, or it's just okay, because that's fine. Like, the search is going to pick up some players that you don't like, and the search doesn't know why you don't like those players. You know why you don't like those players. So it's not a big deal. Wipe them off the list. And I find it really funny because people have these really set expectations for these kind of workflows. And I think there's a long way to go in how that evolves.
Interesting. So how have you used that in your decision making for the business, and the lessons that you've seen in these sports enterprises, bringing that back to your business and the way you make decisions?
Well, I think, and you touched on this earlier, I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to consider whatever, everyone talks about you need a painkiller, not a vitamin. And then that's really more elusive than you might think, and really important. But also, I think it's important to consider for your users, what's more important to them, what's more impactful, like not doing something wrong or doing something right, or not doing something poorly, or is it doing something really well? What's going to make a bigger difference? Where's their focus? Right? Our team's focused on signing the right players, or are they focused on not signing the wrong players, which is making a bigger difference for them? It's like, what motivates you more, avoiding shame or having more joy? And I think it's really important to investigate that and index for that in your operations. And I've definitely been on that journey where I'm trying to learn more. Is there one person in the organization who thinks that adopting this is going to help get them promoted or help them look good in their industry? And do I lean into that? Or is there a pain point that multiple people are sharing that I can help resolve? And is that why the sale is going to get done? And I don't think that there's a one size fits all, but I do think that it's increasingly important to develop the skills to read the room, so to speak, as a founder.
Gotcha. So what's next for Gemini? What are some of those challenges that are holding you back today?
Yeah, so we're in our go-to-market in soccer with this new product that we've developed, and we're working our way towards some of the next fundraising milestones and looking to scale and get to profitability. I think like most young companies, we will have the challenge for a while that I will always wish I'm out there demoing and showing people the product that we'll have in 6 months. That I'm over the moon with what we've got now, but what we're going to have in 6 months is going to blow people away. And so how can I communicate the excitement and get the buy-in on going on that journey with us? I think the other challenge is inevitably that it's just really hard to prioritize. It's really hard to know, is this next feature the thing that changes everything for us? Do we look for more small wins to smooth out the current experience, or do we take a really big swing knowing that AI is changing everything, and building that other thing might be much easier in 2 or 3 months based on what tech is out there for us? Yeah, the big scary world of AI is an immense opportunity, but it raises as many questions as it does answers right now.
So what will you do differently in this next round of funding? The next time you go out there and pitch, the next time you talk to investors, what are you going to do differently that you learned the first time that will maybe provide better results or quicker results for you?
Yeah. I think the common piece of advice that people really miss when they're raising their first couple rounds is investors really are only looking for 3 or 4 pieces of information from you. And you should not make it difficult for them to obtain those pieces of information. And you should make it really crystal clear and anticipate whatever questions or answers to whatever questions they might have about those numbers or about those pieces of information, right? So how do you make money? How are you going to get them the return, and how big is that going to be, and why, right? What problem does your product solve, and who for? And how much are you going to be able to charge, and how's that going to evolve over time? Like, many startups pitch 15 slides and don't answer any of those questions, or at least not with any clarity. And I think kind of sticking to that is key. And I'd say embedded in that is say what you do in a sentence that these investors can understand at the start, middle, and end, because they will not pick up on it the way you think they will, or as easily as you think they will. So, hey, we're a command center, a hub for squad planning. We are Moneyball as software. Like, say it in a couple different ways so that you're sure that they get it. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be writing an investment memo, and they're going to have to put a line at the top, and chances are they're going to get that at least 20% wrong. So try and minimize that. And I'd say I'm focusing on the information that they need to know. So in our case, it'll be, what's our revenue run rate, what are our expenses, and what are the milestones. So that's the other thing, is be really clear on the milestones that this funding is going to get you to. People focus too much on use of proceeds. That's going to change. Focus on what this money is going to get you to, because these investors, remember, like, always put yourself in their shoes. They're going to be looking for a markup. They're going to be looking for someone else to de-risk this further down the road. So you have to equip them to say to their investment committee how and why that's going to happen when they put their money into your company.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I noticed in the things that you said they're looking for, not once did you say, what's your background? Who are you? Where'd you come from? What did you do before this? That kind of thing. I see so many people create pitch decks, and the first thing they start with is, hey, I'm Russ Katzman. Here's what I've done in my past and why I'm important and why you should listen. I've taken it out of decks completely for people. What's that?
Can I swear on this podcast?
Oh, please. Go ahead.
No, the shit. They don't. They really don't. Look, I will say they do want to know why you're the person to take this company where you're trying to take it. That is important, but they want to know in about 5 seconds, not 5 minutes, the way most try to. Like I say, I worked in pro sports for 9 years, and I experienced this problem myself. Off you go. That's it.
And frankly, to your point, they don't give a shit until they understand why they should be listening to begin with. If you don't start with your problem and provide a solution that makes sense to them and show them how you can implement that solution and the time frame and the money and that kind of stuff, then they'll want to know, okay, great. Are you the person to make it happen?
Yeah, exactly. I would say everything about pitching, from the decks I see and the friends I've advised, it needs to be much clearer and much more concise. How can you explain why your lead engineer is the perfect lead engineer for what you're doing in 8 words? And yeah, it's like they will learn more about you when they take you for lunch as part of due diligence. They don't need to know that in the first 5 minutes that they're talking to you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So tell me a little bit, we've had a few of your lessons already, right? Give me those top 2 or 3 things about being an entrepreneur that you just didn't expect.
Well, I'm caught between the really obvious ones that I just had to learn myself that people really need to internalize, or trying to be a little offbeat. So I'll blend it. I'll say all of the platitudes that people tell you, and you think, this person's jaded, or my case is different. You're wrong. It's true. They are the lessons, and those are: don't run out of money, always take what's on the table, fire fast, hire slow. Like, all those things, they're true for, they're said over and over for a reason. I'll try and give a few besides that. I think stay really small as long as you can. Like, I way overhired, and I really let myself believe we had product market fit when we were nowhere near. And I think you'll get this rush. You'll get, oh, we've raised money. Oh, we've got a couple customers. This is great. We should totally hire 2 customer success people. It's like, you're the customer success person. I don't care how hard it is. Prove it to yourself more and further before spending money, before making moves. Like I am so frugal about amounts that I wouldn't have thought twice about a year ago. And obviously it should have gone in the opposite order. So I'd say, like, really don't hire, don't spend money, don't expand until you are certain you've got product market fit. I would say, obviously every company is different, but maybe don't go above 5 employees until you have product market fit if you can. The other one I'd say when it comes to hiring is the person is so much more important than the profile or the resume. Like, yes, you need engineers that can do amazing things. Yes, you need salespeople that have sales talent and so forth. But people that are intrinsically motivated, people that have thick skin, people that are in it for the long haul, people that just bring phenomenal energy into the room, people that figure stuff out on their own, that's just so much more important than what coding language they know or who have they worked for. It's so much more important. I used to fall in love with resumes, and the person behind it matters so much more. A small group of people that are really focused can achieve incredible things. And along that note, people might not want to hear this. I would not hire from big companies. I would not hire from big corporates. I would try to really avoid people who haven't worked for startups. If you want to hire like a college kid for a specific reason, and this is his first experience, that's fine. But hiring someone from big tech, they don't know how to work at that pace. They're probably going to be sour about the pay cut that they say that they're happy to take to come work for a startup. They're used to having people help them with everything and do everything for them. Like, I don't care how wonderful they are, what projects they've worked on. It's not a good pattern match. I think those are my biggest lessons.
No, those are great. I think we might title this podcast "Don't Fall in Love with a Resume." Because it's so easy to do, right? You have this profile. These are the things that I want this person to do. So I'm going to find somebody who can do those things instead of, this is the character of the person I want to bring in, and we'll find a place for them.
We'll find a place.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll find a place for them. And there's a real synergy of standing next to people that have your back, that are all rowing in the same direction. It is catastrophic to have people who aren't doing that. And I think, just while I'm on the soapbox, I'd probably say that mediocrity is as dangerous as toxicity. Like, people will leave because they're working with mediocre people, and you will make every excuse for them under the sun, and it will only harm you. I thought of another lesson and a half, if that's okay, Russ.
Go ahead.
So I think I'd say an overarching one is people only care about you when you're winning, and that's okay. So it's just a fact of life. You're, that sales prospect that you thought was really interested but has now ghosted you for a few months, they're going to call you as soon as one of their friends or rivals has signed with you, or as soon as you get a big press release. Like, that's just the reality. So don't get jaded about it. Don't get sour about it. And that goes for employees. That goes for investors. People like you when you're winning. And on that note, I would say, look, I love our investors. I think we have an unbeatable group. I really mean that. I'd also say an important lesson is, your investors don't care about you as a person as much as they care about doing their job well, or as much as they're obligated to do their job well. And part of that is kind of treating you like a leper when it's not going very well, or being all over you when it is going well. That is just their job. They have to present and navigate and make decisions based off of the risk that your company is presenting. So just don't think that these are your social friends who are just going to be there for you when it gets tough. That's not the way that this business works. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean you can't have a beer with them and, interact with their families and everything, but like, this is a business. And the tides will shift many different times in many different directions based on how your trajectory is going, their fund timing, how much dry powder they have, the macro environment. I have investors that I that would be lining up to put another check into our business who are like a hard no because they're more afraid of tariffs than our other investors. Like there's just all these factors, and just don't count on anything from your VC investors, not because they're not lovely people, but because that's their job.
Well, and I think that, you mentioned about wanting to grow too fast. I think there's an obligation or perceived obligation when investors get involved that they're looking to get their money out, right? I had a client that was going to open 3 facilities over the course of 3 years, right? They got investors involved. Pretty soon they're looking to open 3 facilities in, 9 months. And that kind of thing, that pressure, that internal push from those investors can force you to want to grow faster than, to your point, than you really probably should.
That's right. So that's another one. Sorry, you got me going. Your VCs have different motivations than you do. They have different end games in mind than you do. It is completely unavoidable. You might have the one thing in common that you want your company to become $1 billion company. That's about where it ends. Everything else has some bifurcation, and that's okay, but you're going to have to navigate it together. And do not mistake their advice or their requests or their recommendations for the carte blanche or the irrefutable best practice for your business. You have the fiduciary responsibility, right? You have to decide what's best for your business, and you have so much more context than them. And the best piece of advice I got from a VC in the last year was trust your gut more and sooner. So you made me think of one other top lesson I want to share, and that is that as an entrepreneur, you will have horrific things happen. You will have extremely rough days and events and just catastrophes. And not only is it completely up to you to get through them, but they will be ancient history more and faster than you might think. That you'll look back and just laugh at it. And so I'd say a key part of entrepreneurship is expecting and accepting that you're going to have some really bad days and just moving past it, because that's what it takes.
Yep. That's perfect. Well, Jake, this has been a pleasure. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to throw out there?
No, you put me on the soapbox. I hope it was helpful.
No, I think this is going to be great. Tons of nuggets, great information from you. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Russ.
That's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. If today's conversation sparks something in you, don't just let it sit. Take action today to build your future. Make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. And if you got a story to share or you just want to connect, you know where to find me. Until next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.